Why do good, technically sound tools keep getting quietly set aside by the forestry professionals they were designed to help?
It's a great question. And it's this constant tension, isn't it, between the academic rigor and the reality on the ground. We
Right.
have this amazing science, brilliant models, tools that offer a level of detail we couldn't have dreamed of 20 years ago.
But they don't always stick.
They often don't,
Yeah.
because those outputs, they're packaged in a way that just doesn't survive contact with reality. And
Mm.
reality in forestry is, often rainy, constrained, and moving really fast.
That is the core question we are unpacking today on the FBS podcast. We're looking at the findings of the new Forest Business School report on field level research and resource needs.
It's a critical report.
It really is. It asks that central question. Why is it so hard to get brilliant applied research to stick in the daily workflow of the industry?
And what makes this report so essential is that it moves past just assuming people are resistant to change.
Right, that they're Luddites or something.
Exactly. The findings are grounded in feedback from a whole cross-section of professionals, people making critical decisions every single day. They're not Luddites. They're just incredibly busy.
Yeah, the report calls the group they surveyed a foundation of shared experience. It seems they drew from a lot of different perspectives.
They did. And that foundation spans three really critical groups. First, you have the forest business leaders and owners.
The people responsible for the bottom
The
line.
people responsible for management, for strategy, for the money. Then second, you have public agency staff.
So they're dealing with policy, program oversight, utilization.
All of that. And then, crucially, the third group, the ground level professionals,
The foresters, the planners, the folks actually in the woods.
the ones doing the field-based planning and implementation. And their combined perspective is the only way you can really get a true measure of what this friction feels like.
So what was the big takeaway?
Well, they all confirm the central finding.
Right.
Applied research often fails to land, not because the science is poor,
But because of it.
because of accumulated friction. That gap between the research output and the real-world messy decision-making. It's not a lack of interest, it's a failure of workflow alignment.
I get that. It's the difference between a clean textbook example and a rainy Tuesday afternoon when the equipment is bogged down.
That's it, exactly.
So to understand that friction, you have to understand how these decisions are actually made. It's not a simple checklist.
Precisely. The report makes it clear it's a dynamic, iterative process.
Yeah.
Professional judgment and adaptation are always at the core. They're constantly blending multiple inputs.
Okay, so walk us through a scenario. What does that look like on the ground?
Okay, think about a forester prescribing a harvest. They start with their direct field observation of the stand, what the site actually looks like today.
Boots on the ground.
Then they blend that with prior experience and past prescriptions. Maybe you copy the last successful RX from a similar stand they managed 5 years ago.
Has it worked?
Because it worked and because it's defensible.
Which is perfectly rational.
Absolutely. But then they also have to integrate the landowner goals and constraints. Is the owner focused on cash flow, or maybe wildlife habitat, or just aesthetics?
And those constraints are non-negotiable.
Right. And finally, you layer on all the institutional and regulatory requirements. That's why no single input, especially some new research tool, can just dominate the process. It has to fit.
And that's where even a technically superior new tool starts to create that friction you mentioned.
Yes. When the practitioners were surveyed, they consistently said that time and cognitive load are real constraints.
The mental energy it takes.
It's a huge factor. If a new system demands a whole new way of working, or you have to build a secondary data structure just to feed it information, well, that's just too much professional overhead.
It's a calculation of effort versus the actual gain.
Absolutely. And if a tool promises a 2% increase in optimization, but requires a 50% increase in data collection time, that calculation fails every single time. Technical merit becomes irrelevant.
Which is exactly why older, more familiar tools persist. Even if, theoretically, a new decision support system in DSS offers higher fidelity.
Exactly.
So let's talk about those familiar tools. We're talking legacy guides, old volume tables, maybe even software like FBS, the Forest Vegetation Simulator. Why do people stick with them?
Well, it's not nostalgia. It's business security. These tools are, first, trusted and defensible. They're based on established, well-accepted data and assumptions.
So they're stable.
Stable and consistent. The results are reproducible, which is vital if your prescription ever gets challenged by a regulator or in court. But the most critical part, they have a low cognitive load.
Minimal data input.
Minimal, easily obtainable data,
Yeah.
and they fit right into existing workflows.
FBS is like that old trusted pickup truck. You know exactly how it handles, even if the dashboard looks like it's from the 90s.
That's a perfect analogy. It's
Yeah.
stable, the parameters are clear. Now, you contrast that with some of the newer, more complex DSS platforms.
Which are designed for optimization but often fail that alignment test.
They do. And that's where the friction becomes really high.
So what does that high friction look like in practice for these newer systems?
They often have a high data or maintenance burden. Think about a DSS that requires you to go out and collect onerous manual plot data you would normally collect.
Just so the model can run.
Just the model can run. Or they make you build and maintain a whole secondary data structure separate from your core business system. It's just duplicate work.
And then you have the steep learning curves and the uncertainty.
That's maybe the biggest risk factor they highlighted. Uncertain longevity and support.
Ah, right.
Why should a busy professional invest weeks learning a complex new tool only for it to become a one-off that gets abandoned a year later?
When the grant funding runs out or the grad student who built it moves on.
Exactly. That investment of their time is money. They simply can't afford to waste it on something that might not be around next year. They're making a rational choice to stick with what's durable.
So this demand for friction reduction, it brings us right to a key insight from the report. Practitioners are demanding simplicity.
Yes, minimum viable data and effort. They don't want to complicate their lives. They want clarification. They want efficiency.
And you can see this friction in very specific places, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like systems that require constant, complex configuration, or incompatible data formats that mean you're spending an hour cleaning data.
That's an hour you're not in the field or talking to a landowner.
An hour lost.
Yeah.
And then there's the simple need for mobile accessibility. So many pros are managing their work from the tailgate of a truck. They need systems that work on a phone or a tablet.
There was even a specific mention about wanting a replacement for software like PlotHound.
Yes, for cruise compilation. It shows they are eager for better systems, but the current options are just creating financial and technical barriers that are too high.
Okay, so if the older tools win on stability and the newer ones often fail on friction, how are people solving this cognitive load problem for themselves right now?
Well, that leads us directly to the AI factor.
Right.
AI is being adopted as a really powerful force for reducing that professional overhead. But, and this is key, not as a replacement for human judgment.
So it's a professional assistant.
It's a professional assistant. The report shows widespread use of AI tools like ChatGPT, NotebookLM, Gemini, you name it. But they're using them for support tasks, not for writing prescriptions.
It's handling the mental tax of the job, the administrative burden. So what are they actually using it for?
It's the high-leverage grunt work.
Hmm.
Things like drafting and editing plans, permits, or client emails, summarizing and analyzing long technical documents.
So instead of reading a 50-page paper on, say, a new invasive species, you can get a digestible summary in minutes.
That's a massive reduction in friction. It lets the human focus on strategy. They're also using it for organizing information like compliance materials and for learning unfamiliar topics like complex regulations.
That's fascinating. And the report said that while many are already using AI, a lot of them are asking for more training.
Yes, which suggests a really strong desire to leverage it even more effectively. They want practical, ethical training, not just theory.
This all seems to tie back to a central idea. Format matters.
It's critical. The report is very clear. You have to match the format to the use case. Otherwise, you're just creating more friction.
Right. Trying to explain a management plan to a landowner using a full research paper is just not going to work.
It's like using a chainsaw to apply fertilizer. For day-to-day decisions and communication, what people want are infographics, visuals, and concise two-page fact sheets.
And these shorter formats aren't less rigorous. They're just designed for a different purpose.
Exactly. They serve immediate communication needs. Full research papers still have their place, of course, but it's for deep technical reference or internal documentation. The point is that shorter formats are differently useful, and they're vital for actually getting things done in the field.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little. Let's look at the specific areas where practitioners feel the biggest gaps exist. Where are people asking for more direct, actionable help?
The needs really cluster around a few key areas. The first one is applied silviculture.
Which means?
They need techniques for implementing management under real-world constraints. Not textbook constraints, but real financial and regulatory ones.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. The report cited the challenge of oak regeneration. Textbook solutions often rely on prescribed fire.
But on most private land, that's just not an option.
It's politically, legally, or practically impossible.
Well,
Liability, regulations, proximity to homes. So
yeah.
they need new, non-fire-based techniques that are proven and repeatable. The research isn't translating fast enough.
That's a perfect example. What's the second area of need?
Forest health and emerging threats. This is all about high uncertainty and fast-moving information. The slow spread of information on threats like emerald ash borer was cited as a chronic problem.
By the time the official peer-reviewed guide comes out,
The threat has already moved past the early intervention stage. It speaks directly to the need for speed and agility.
okay, what's third?
Markets and regional wood supply analysis. Practitioners need forward-looking analysis. Where are the markets headed in the next 5 or 10 years? They need help with wood supply modeling, especially as mills close or new uses for wood emerge.
That's specialized work for sure. And the last couple of areas are less about trees and more about the business itself.
Exactly. Fourth is business and financial decision-making. They want practical, accessible training on things like cash flow management for a small firm, negotiation skills, and, critically, how to read a business through its accounting.
Translating the numbers into actual strategy, a vital skill.
It's the difference between being a good forester and running a sustainable business. And the fifth need was communication and human factors, things like conflict resolution and just effectively engaging with landowners.
So all these gaps, oak regeneration, EAB updates, business finance, they all demand a mechanism that can translate good research into usable formats quickly.
That is precisely the boundary where the Forest Business School operates. Our whole role is to take that strong foundational research and accelerate its translation and deployment specifically to reduce that friction we've been talking about.
And the report highlights that FBS is built for that speed and adaptation.
Right. Unlike institutions that might be constrained by long approval cycles, FBS can convert findings into usable formats quickly. That means mobile tools, short courses, presentations, and, well, this podcast. We can deploy and update content as fast as the feedback comes in.
You're also already integrating AI in practical ways.
We are. To summarize those reports, to organize information, to reduce that cognitive load for our users, and we maintain these direct, active feedback loops with business owners, consultants, and agency staff.
So you can test if a tool actually helps in the field, not just if it's technically sound.
And then we can iterate on it. We complement the rigor of academia with the speed and practicality that the industry is demanding right now.
Which really is what mid-career professionals are asking for. They want to know, how do I apply this right now on my job without having to start over?
That's the core barrier we're trying to solve.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you, the listener? We need to remember the core purpose of this work. This podcast is part of the Forest Business School's mission to help mid-career professionals in the forestry world level up their skills and mindset so they can make the next big jumps in their career. You can find more of this practical, friction-reducing content designed exactly for your real-world needs at www.vfbs.com.
And if we can summarize the key insight from this whole report, it's this. Friction is the existential enemy of applied research.
It has to be a core design principle.
Usability has to be. That means tools must demand minimum viable data and effort. They need clear boundaries on their scope, and the format has to be designed for the real use case, not the convenience of the researcher.
The people in the field are busy, they're smart, and they're facing intense constraints. They're not abandoning science because they're resistant. They're abandoning tools that make their very difficult job even harder.
They're making rational business choices.
So the takeaway is,
Applied research succeeds not when researchers convince users to work harder, but when friction is treated as a design problem, not a personal failure,
Right.
and when translation is treated as real work. That is the essential insight. It's about meeting the user exactly where they are.
a fantastic and actionable way to reframe this entire conversation. Thank you for walking us through this critical report.